I found myself that day with burns on 100% of my body, and 87% of them were third degree. It is in 2026, as you and I record this, or in 1987 when it happened, it is a death sentence.
Welcome back to the Wealth and Purpose Podcast. I'm your host, Brady Fineski, and today's guest is one that many of you may already know, or you certainly may know his story. At age 9, John O'Leary was burned on almost 100% of his body in a devastating fire and was given almost no chance of survival. Not only did he survive, but he's transformed that experience into a mission that has inspired millions through his books, speaking, podcast, and his movie Soul on Fire. His books, On Fire and In Awe, challenge us to stop simply surviving life, but to really start living it fully. He's one of the most sought-after keynote speakers in America, host of the Living Inspired podcast, and the creator of Monday Moments, something that I start my week with now. So, John, welcome to the show.
Man, what an intro. I can't wait to meet the man you introduced. I don't sound like him at all to myself. But what I will say, Brady, is we get invited on a lot of these shows and cannot say yes to all of them. But after meeting you and hearing your story and understanding your heart for what you do and why you do it, like this was the easiest yes of all time.
Oh.
So this is an honor, man.
Thank you. It's been awesome to get to know you. And I think, like I said, a lot of our listeners probably know already, but some may not. And so, one of the things I love about your story is that most people initially see your story or hear it, and they think it's about surviving a fire when it's actually about how to live and how you've turned this tragedy into triumph. So let's maybe start there in case our listeners aren't as familiar with you or your story. Take us back to the fire briefly in those early days.
Yeah. And I'm glad you framed it in that way. The reality is, if my job today was to speak about being burned as a child and recovering physically, I would have put myself out of work 19 years ago when I started. But this isn't about medical recovery. It's about spiritual vibrancy. It's about being fully alive in every aspect of your life, even after going through the worst, whatever that might be for all of us. So you asked about the fire. When I was 9, growing up in the Midwest, not far from where you are, I'm out here in St. Louis, saw kids in my neighborhood playing with fire and gasoline, and just figured, man, if these big old 11-year-old kids could do it, I could as well. So I walked into my parents' garage on a Saturday morning, bent over a 5-gallon can of gasoline, tried to pour a little bit of gasoline on top, and before the liquid even came out, the fumes, the invisible stuff, came out of that can, grabbed my little flame, created this massive explosion that split a 5-gallon metal can in half and launched me, Brady, 20 feet against the far side of the garage. Set my world on fire. I mean, you've read the book, you know the story, you saw the film. Long story made short, and you unpack whatever you want from it. But I found myself that day with burns on 100% of my body, and 87% of them were third degree. It is in 2026, as you and I record this, or in 1987 when it happened, it is a death sentence. And yet here we are today having this conversation.
Well, and that's, I think back to so many parts of the movie and the book, but once it started with, and maybe it started with that question from your mom, do you want to live, right? And I think about family and the importance of family and being a parent that's gone through a difficult moment with a child. I know they need to be there for encouragement, but also, through that journey, there's different lessons that pop up. And what are a couple of the biggest lessons that your family learned during that early part of your journey?
Gosh, the very first thing we all learned the day of is it's not about us. You jumped to my mom, and I can't wait to come back to her. But before we got to my mom, literally, I was in the front hall of my house on fire with flames leaping 3 feet off of my body in all directions. And by the way, where they filmed the movie is in St. Louis. And so that house was my mom and dad's house. So that front hall in that movie is actually the front hall where this thing happened, which is, it's beautiful and painful to watch that scene unfold because that's what happened. So I'm on the front hall screaming and burning and praying for a hero. In my mind, I'm thinking, God, I'll take anybody. And I see my brother Jim come toward me, and as he moves toward me, he's 17. My first thought was, God, anybody else, not him, man. I know my teenage brother.
Right.
And yet, that was the day my brother was used for good. And he picks up this rug, he beat down the flames, carries me outside, jumps on top of me, burns himself in the process, but goes back into the house that's on fire and calls 911. And while he's doing his thing, these little girls are in the front yard. One of them is holding me in the front yard. Her name's Amy. She's 11. I'm naked. My clothes and skin have been burnt off. And this girl on a January morning just pulls me close, even though she's burning herself while doing so, and just keeps encouraging. And to her encouragement, I remember I just kept saying back to her, Amy, I don't want to live. I want to die. I want to die. And she just kept saying, John, have faith and fight. The best is yet to come. And overhearing this was our little sister, Susie, who goes into the burning house. Turns out she gets a cup of water, comes back outside, throws the water into my face, turns around, runs back in and gets a second cup, throws it into my face and gets a third cup that day, risking her life for mine. So you asked, John, what did your family learn? The first thing we learned is, contrary to what Facebook and media has taught you, life is not about you at all. And contrary to sometimes what we even think in our plans financially for the future, it's not about us. It's how we can use the gifts that we've received to elevate those around us. That sometimes means great vacations and great experiences, for sure. But it's about something bigger than that. And that day, these three little kids, my siblings, recognized what it is about and what it's not. And in doing so, it changed their life and mine. So that's one thing. The second thing we learned, it goes back to my mom's question, the gift of agency. We give so much power to the headlines in the Wall Street Journal or to our neighbor's opinion on our life or our business or our president. And what my mother's question was a reminder of is the agency we each possess to choose the path forward. And the question I asked her, and she, it turns out in the emergency room, my dad came in, he's a business owner. I thought he was going to be irate. Instead, he just greeted me with love and compassion and mercy. And right behind my dad came my mom, and I looked at her and said, Mom, knock it off with all the love. I mean, enough love, guys. Am I going to die? Am I going to die? And she looked back at me and she said, do you want to? And this is like the inflection point. I recognize, you've been through your own profound loss, Brady. I recognize like you can't guarantee success on the path forward if you want it bad enough. But ultimately, that little boy that day, for me, who wanted to die the moment before she asked the question, had a change of heart. And until we first change that, we can't change anything else. And I looked at my mother and I said, Mama, I do not want to die. I want to live. And her response was, baby, look at me. Take the hand of God. Walk the journey with him. But honey, you do your part. Fight like you never fought before. She said, Dad and I are with you, man. We're not leaving, but do your part in fighting. On January 17th, 1987, a 9-year-old child with burns on 100% of his body shut his eyes, took God's hand, and walked forward. And it's what got us, I think, ultimately through 5 months in hospital and amputations and skin grafts and bandage changes and the war. Like, burn care is brutal. And had I known that on day one, I'm not sure I could have got through it. But all I knew on day one is the gift of shutting your eyes and stepping forward in faith.
Well, it's amazing what God has done with your yes and what he does with all of us that say yes to him. And you're just such a great example of that. But also in humility, you always, bring up these other heroes that showed up. And so I'd love to have them hear about Roy or Lavelle that had such an important role in this difficult journey, an important part of that, because we all have the opportunity to help others. We all have the opportunity to find purpose in the situations we're placed in, the moments that we're placed in. And I think those two stories just captured my heart in watching it, and I would love for them to hear those as well.
They're so good. So, you're recording this from your beautiful studio and the walls are perfect and painted. And mine's a little bit more, you see mail that's partially open behind me and pictures that are askew. And right over my shoulder, you see the tippity top of the movie poster. So our movie poster, when they first designed it for Soul on Fire, was a picture of the guy playing John. It was a hero shot, white background. I'm wearing a baseball jersey in the poster, the guy playing me. And he's kind of like looking up, almost like, gosh, what I've done is mighty impressive. So I wrote him back and I'm like, hey guys, The movie's not about him. You got to redo the poster. So when they redid the movie poster, they put John kind of with his arms up in the air, but they turned him around backwards. They turned him into a silhouette, so you can't see him at all. And then what you see is, if you look more closely, it's a mosaic of every one of the individuals who showed up in John's life, whether they were siblings or parents or EMTs or firefighters or first responders or doctors in the ED, and like onward from there. In other words, John's not the hero. Like, I'm not humble. I'm honest. I'm aware. I am the recipient of ridiculous mercies and incredible leadership and tons of love. And I did my part. We'll talk, I'm sure, about that at some point. But man, had I not received all that from everybody else and from God, there's no way you and I are talking today. So 2 of the people on that movie poster are hospital employees. The first one you mentioned is Lavelle. The way we tell his story in the book and in the movie and in real life, because they reflect what happened. My doctor's name was Vachiavajan, and he would come in every morning and he would round with everybody on the team. The first person in line behind the doctor was not a young resident or a fellow physician. The first person in line every morning for 5 months was a guy named Lavelle, our janitor. And one by one, he would walk each person through by name and remind them of the dignity of the work they did. And then he would say, thank you to each employee. With burn care, the number one killer of burn victims is infection. That's what kills patients. And it's not the CEO or the wealth manager or the executive or the doctor or the motivational speaker who controls infection. I'm not trying to be like, oh, that's a good leadership lesson, I should write it down. It's not an idea, it's fact. The most important person on the team is the one most of us walk right past. And this doctor, I got emotional talking about it, man. He refused to walk right past the least among us. Instead, he celebrated the dignity of the work and recognized, without it being done well and right, this patient will, in all likelihood, die. And so the first name you mentioned was Lavelle. Lavelle was my janitor. And over 5.5 months in hospital, he became my buddy. And he would let me listen to his music headset. And time in hospital is so hard. And this man, for the time he cleaned my room, made it a moment of pleasure and music and vibrancy in life. So that's the first guy, the minimum wage janitor, Lavelle. And then the second man you mentioned, his name was Roy. Roy was also in that train of employees. Roy's in charge of the bandage change. Roy's a CNA, LPN, whatever the job title is today. We used to call them techs. But what a tech means is, in business terms, a minimum wage employee. Just another one of those guys somewhere on the team, relatively replaceable. Except the doctor had reminded his techs that they're not, that they're irreplaceable, that what they do actually matters. And so this tech named Roy used to come into the room. His job was really just to get me to the bandage change. Doing it right would have required him to put me in a wheelchair and roll me down, get me up and put me into a tub. That's the job. But inspired to do more, Roy used to pick me up. He used to get me on my feet. This is way before I could stand and way before the therapist even thought I ever would. And he would walk me back with my little legs dangling between his. And he would whisper to me, boy, you're going to walk again. You might as well get used to it. Move those legs. Today you walk and I'll walk with you. And Brady, if it happened once, it's a sweet idea of having a kid like envision a bigger future. But Roy came into my room every day during the week for 5.5 months, picking that little limp, dying body up, getting him on his feet and saying, boy, essentially what he's saying is forget death. Forget death. You're going to walk, man, and I'll walk with you.
Yep.
So those are two
That's amazing ones.
Characters.
Well, and through that, it almost takes moments where we have to become so dependent on others for us to be able to see and have gratitude for those types of little things, right? And I know gratitude is talked about a lot, and it can be, overlooked sometimes, but it has to be learned. And sometimes when you're in those situations, unfortunately, that's when we learn it the most. But you did, and you shared it with all of us. And sometimes it's just a small little thing. And that leads me to the next story that some may know, but again, a powerful journey of someone doing just one small thing. And that's the Hall of Fame broadcaster Jack Buck, and that story of helping get you through in another way, but him saying yes to come visit, to come do something, right? So many of the times we tell each other or we tell others, hey, let me know if you need something. Someone's I'm right here for you if you need something. He decided to do something. And I think when we think about purpose, it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be something small, and that ends up being life-changing.
Gosh. I mean, I'm kind of lost for words, and this is a story I know so well. I'm a speaker these days, so I travel around sharing stories, and this is one we share almost every time. But in hearing you frame it like that, it reminds me of how infrequently I do something similar. And that just moves my heart, man, because Jack Buck is about to do something for a child who's dying and will not get out of the hospital. And then after he does what he did not need to do, he then goes on and serves this child for the rest of his life and never tells anybody about it and never dreams in the wildest future that kid would not only live, but thrive and find a platform and then eventually speaking in books and movies where his life, Jack Buck's life, would be celebrated. None of it was about him at all. It was simply about using the gift that he had received, the power of his voice and presence to lift up another. So for those who don't know, Jack Buck was the broadcaster for the St. Louis Cardinals. That was my team growing up. He was in 7 Hall of Fames. So this guy is profoundly successful in everything he touched. But he was also radically significant, meaning he's a greatest era, the greatest generation type guy. Fought in the war, picked up a Purple Heart, stayed humble, stayed hungry, and just built a good life. Not perfect, but he built a good life. And on the night I was burned, he learned down at a party. He was at it's called the Media Writers Celebration. It's where they kind of celebrate the stories told from the previous 12 months in sports. And he learned that night that a little boy had been burned earlier that day in St. Louis and was going to die. And so, for the listeners, if we haven't yet rocked you to sleep, how frequently are you at the cocktail party and you learn about tragedy? And what do you do? And if you're at all like me, at best, you say, oh man, I'll keep him in my thoughts and prayers. And then if you're really radical, you do it. You might actually say a prayer once. Jack Buck, who is a Hall of Fame announcer, leaves the party where he's being celebrated to visit a stranger. It makes for good theater in a movie later on in life, but this isn't, in his case, theater. It's leaving comfort in a position of privilege, driving 20 minutes out west, going to a burn center, which, you've been around the hospital halls. A hospital's a tough place to spend time, and a burn center is one of the worst spaces within it. He goes on in, visits a child who's dying. My eyes are swollen shut. I can't see, but I could hear. And Jack Buck speaks light into my darkness when he says, kid, wake up. You're going to live. Keep fighting. John O'Leary Day at the ballpark will make it all worthwhile. Keep fighting. And then he stands, he walks out, he leaves, he weeps. And Brady, he's told in the hallway that the little boy is going to die. And, he had already done more than enough. And even after being told the kid is going to die, as you saw in the movie, because it happened in real life, the following day, Sunday morning, Jack Buck shows back up, comes back into this child's room and through his darkness and says, kid, wake up. You're going to live. Keep fighting. So you mentioned one thing, man. It was one thing, but it became a second thing and a third thing and a lifetime of more things.
Yeah. Yeah. It was almost as if he didn't have to, but he wanted to know what more could I do, right, to help you. But one of them in particular, knowing that, some of the therapy you had to go through and to relearn how to write again motivated you to keep going with the baseball story.
Well, there's it's all a baseball story.
Yeah, it's all baseball, yeah.
The Promise of John O'Leary Day at the ballpark was amazing. A baseball story. Yeah. And for the listeners trying to attach this to why it matters to them, the news will tell you, if you pay attention at all, that it's never been worse. And then they will validate that with some type of data point. The murder up north, the fire down south, the bombing in the Middle East, and more. And in a 24-hour news cycle, we will be convicted that we have never lived in worse days than these, and there's no ability we have to influence anything for good. That's what the news does. Jack recognized the news signal of the day. This child dying, struggles everywhere, but rather than whining about it or just living in the misery of it, that's where society is right now. 94% of news stories last year were negative, and 3 times last year the Wall Street Journal reported as fact that the American dream is dead. So this is not like John's having a bad day. I'm having a great day. But apparently we as a nation and we as a world are not, if you follow the news. But rather than follow it, I say, let's make it, man. And Jack is where I learned that. So Jack shows up. He encourages this kid to dream through the adversity of the day. We have to have a vision. We have to have some direction for our life and our money and our resources and our family and our fortunes and everything else we're building up. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? So Jack is casting a vision of tomorrow for this dying child, which is important. We get to John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. He rolls me around. I remember he rolls me into the players-only clubhouse. They do not show this in the movie for good reason, but when he rolls me in, every single player is in various stages of undress. And it was a scarring experience for this 9-year-old boy. So he rolls to the one clothed man in the dugout area, and I get to meet a guy named Terry Pendleton, and then Willie McGee, and then Jack Clark, and then Ozzie Smith, and then Vince Coleman, and then the manager Whitey Herzog, and one by one, my heroes. And then he takes me upstairs and we broadcast the ball game together. It's a day I'll never forget. And he learns that evening, as this little boy is just sitting next to him in his little wheelchair, that I can't physically do anything. So I've survived, but for what? And the following day, I'm at home, and my mother goes to the door. There's a doorbell ring, and there's a mailman there. He's got a package. She brings it over to me. It's from a guy named Jack Buck. We open it up together, and inside is a baseball from Ozzie Smith. And below the signed ball from Ozzie is a note that reads, "Hey kid, if you want a second baseball, write a thank you letter." And Brady, I can't do anything. I'm a victim. But I want a second baseball. When with the help, you talked earlier about reliance on others. What a great idea. It's not very Western, by the way, but it's a fact of life. The beauty of leaning into your brothers and sisters along the way. So I lean into 2 occupational therapists. They push my hands together. We write the note. We mail it off. And 2 days later, I got a second baseball with a note. This one was signed by Stan Musial. And the note read, "Kid, if you want a second baseball, write a thank you letter." So I did. And then a third baseball shows up with a note that reads, "Kid, if you want a fourth." And to make sure we don't put everybody to sleep before they get out of this podcast, the short story is Jack sent a child with no fingers 60 baseballs, teaching a fingerless, broken, scarred, nobody kid that your life matters. Act like it.
Yep.
Act like it. And so I learned through his assistance.
That's amazing.
That I could ride again.
That's amazing. And I love that story. I love the part of what more can I do? I've used that this week in a difficult family situation we have going on. And I went home and told Katie, what more can we do? Like, we need to do something else. And it doesn't need to be big, right? We talk about how do we connect wealth and purpose, and finding purpose can seem like this overwhelming thing. You know, what is our purpose now that we've had this success or whatever it is? And I love that sometimes it can just be simple. You know, like you said multiple times so far, say yes to being used for good and living for the one that's right in front of you. Send a kid a baseball, motivate him to do something. Like, all those little stories are so helpful for me. And it leaves me a bit, and maybe it's a good transition to the second part here, is about your book, In Awe. Because it does. It leaves me in awe of how God has used you, the stories of the people and the heroes that you uncovered and recognized and were grateful for, leaves me in awe. But, you know, sometimes many of the challenges we see with successful families, that they've achieved everything, but they kind of just still feel empty. and they've lost kind of the awe and the joy that exists in these ordinary moments. And you don't want tragedy to be the thing that causes you to have to go back to, geez, I should have been more grateful. I should have been. And so when you think about the book In Awe and some of the many things you wrote in there, and what are the things that, what are some practical ways, I guess, that people can kind of rediscover wonder in everyday life?
Gosh. Well, so the background of the book In Awe is I was traveling a ton at this point in my career. And it was like 2016, 17, 18 on fire, just come out and we're speaking all over the place, checking into fancy hotels all the time. And in my travels and in the hotel check-ins, and we're talking fancy places, I was looking around at the monotony and the misery of people enduring the sluggish days of our lives. It just was hard at the Ritz-Carlton poolside for all of us. Just honestly, man, like there's no greater misery in the world sometimes than the lobby of a Ritz because they lost their dang baggage again. And my flight is delayed 90 minutes going out of Honolulu this week. And so I'm watching that unfold. And candidly, I'm feeling it myself. Works hard, marriage is a struggle sometimes. And then contrasting that with when I would come home. And at that point, I had a 3, 5, 7, and 9-year-old. And the way these kids greeted their dad, and the way they took a walk around the neighborhood, and the way they hung their work up on the fridge, and the way they smiled, and the way they experienced life fully was what I once had myself, what I was losing sense of, and what I was noticing so many adults have. So the premise of the book is, what is it that we had that we've lost, and how do we return to it? And that's just all. And you mentioned, gosh, John, I don't want to go through a diagnosis or lose a friend or family member or lose a job or lose my wealth to recognize what I had. How do we live in awe now? Like, how do we embrace that? Because the cool thing is a lot of the book is like sort of research based and a lot of it is narrative driven from kids, but a lot of it is just adults who are doing this thing the right way.
Yeah.
And so I try to celebrate both hands, both what the little ones were teaching dad, but also what great leaders from like Commander Jim Lavelle from Apollo 13 or Sister Booter, who Nike refers to as the running nun, the iron nun, what they have to teach us about living life well till the end.
Yeah. Well, and being curious is a big part of that, asking amazing questions, having that wonder as you describe, and making sure, again, one of the things we talked about earlier, that immersion of being in the moment that we're in, right? Sometimes we can make it so difficult to really just live this life in an inspired, joyful way, helping others. It's like sometimes we think we have to do so many big things, and I just love that there's so many small things in the book that jumped out at me, but it's just, being fully engaged in the moment you're in. It's hard to do in this world.
In particular, when we're tethered to technology, and in particular, when we're tethered to someone else's opinion of life. If you look at look at your 5-year-old walking out the house. I'm pretty sure they've not looked in the mirror in 5 years of living large, man. Like they do not care because ego is not formed. And so much of what dictates how we show up and whether we hold the door or not is how we think someone might perceive us. And what if instead we didn't care? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a faithful, vibrant way. I can't remember if it's in one of the books or not, but there is a guy, Og Mandino, who wrote a book called The World's Greatest Salesman. If you want to build a bigger business or have greater purpose behind your wealth or whatever else it is, the idea of learning from the guy who is the world's greatest salesperson might be a wise place to turn. And so you asked me earlier, John, give us something simple that we can use to have more awe. And what Mandino says is, how do I greet every person I meet? And now I ask you before I answer it, listeners, how do you greet the person who's checking you at the hotel or the agent who gets you onto that flight you're delayed and now you're going to miss your connection, or your spouse after a long day and it got the best of you and the traffic got the rest of you? How do you greet every person you meet? Be honest. And how do you greet the reflection in the mirror? Be honest. Well, what Mandino says is, in silence and to myself, I say, I love you. And then he goes, though spoken in silence, these words unwrinkle my brow. They shine through my eyes. They bring a smile to my face and they echo in my voice. I love you. So if you're trying to breathe a little more awe into your work or wealth or plan or children or lack thereof or whatever you're dealing with in this world, the idea of looking in the mirror, looking at nature, looking out at others, and whispering the words, I love you, profoundly changes what you're feeling, what you're thinking, how you speak, the actions you take, and the life you get. And if you don't believe me, because you're probably, if I'm listening to my own voice, I'm thinking, what a bunch of bull. Please. You guys, like, I've tried it. And I try to live it. And when you walk into the barista next tomorrow morning, before you order your latte, large, splash of this thing and a splash of that, just silently say, I love you. And then look at her and ask her how she's doing. And watch what they'll look at you like something's wrong because no one else in line all day long has done that. No, even if someone else says, how you doing? They don't care. When you love them first, you are in awe for this experience that's about to happen, and you are about to connect with a barista at some coffee shop. And if you can have a relationship with a barista, imagine what you can have with your kids or with your life or with your wealth or with your significance or with your spouse. So one way to breathe a little bit of awe into relationships in life is just say, gosh, I love you. Nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, I know when we first met, you were coming out of a meeting with an Uber driver that you said yes to. And so now I'm picturing you in that Uber saying, I love you, and being there and then responding and going back to him. And I don't know what happened that day, but I just remember that. And I've used that, as some people have entered my life over the last couple of weeks. And so I'm grateful for that. And you mentioned one thing there, and I didn't write it down. I didn't capture it quite, but it reminded me of the post that I saw you put out today. I believe it was today, about maybe one last story about this little boy who has now recovered, and he's standing at the pool with other kids. And you look down and see your scars for the first time, your skin, it was different. And you went in and put on a turtleneck and tried to cover them up and hide from those scars. And I think that, many of us listening, many of us have our weaknesses, our scars in life, and we tend to maybe sometimes let those things hold us back. And so maybe just that story real quick, and then we'll close with some rapid fire that I have in mind for you.
Yeah. So that I wrote about that in the last couple days. And the question's frequently asked, John, what's the most emotional scene in the film for you? And if you're talking about a film that was shot in my mom and dad's house where John burned. And you're talking about a film that shows band exchanges briefly and Jack Buck entering and the day at the stadium and John getting married eventually. And like all these banger scenes, man, like just great, big moving moments where John wakes up from a surgery to realize his fingers have been amputated. That's a tough scene to write and to film and to watch as the man who still no longer has fingers. Like that breaks my heart still. But the scene that moves me most in that movie is when John's remarkably playing the piano. And we didn't get into that, but only anyone with no fingers can jam Coldplay or U2. And that's a credit to his mother, who refused to let him make excuses. So anyway, I'm playing the piano, and I'm probably 10, maybe 11 years old in the movie and in real life. And my little sister, Susie, comes up and says, John, everybody's outside swimming. Come join us. And so I'm wearing a little pair of shorts and a T-shirt and go upstairs. I put on my trunks. And then as I reach for the trunks with no fingers, I look down and I see these fingerless, scarred hands. And then for the first time, maybe in a long time, that little boy looks in the mirror and he sees a face that's relatively unburned, but he looks below and he sees a neck that is, and a chest that is, and hands that are, and a tummy that is, and legs that are. And he thinks for a moment about what's taking place outside with all these healthy, athletic, perfect children swimming. And so the scene cuts with John putting the swim trunks back in. And when you see it pick back up again, the back door opens. Man, I'm emotional just telling you this.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a turtleneck and pants.
Yeah.
It's summertime. And you see the little boy kind of grab that turtleneck and pull it up nice and tight and walk outside proudly, shoulders back, as if everything's fine. And then it cuts from there to college, where John is seen in the quad, again, still wearing the stupid long sleeve and the long kind of hoodie, but not to look cool and not to stay warm, but to make the scars fade so he can pretend like everything's fine in life. And you alluded to it in the question. What moves me in that scene is partially what I went through, but it's also the reckoning that my wife's had her own story. And my kids in high school and college and grade school, like they're going through their stories and they're hard or they're scarred. They got their own things. And everybody I've ever met in a book line ever comes up to me and they say, John, it's nothing like your story, but, and then they tell me their story. And as you and I were talking the first time, I saw a little picture of a boy behind you on the wall, and I didn't know what the story was, but I knew there was one. And then all of a sudden, near the end of our conversation, you said, John, it's really nothing like your story, but, and you shared. And what just breaks me, but in a good way now, is everybody's got scars that so frequently they try to hide. And yet when we expose this to the light, it becomes the very thing that redeems not only our story, but those we can influence. So the little kid in that movie no longer wears a turtleneck to the pool anymore. Thank God. And the story that broke you most no longer stays hidden. You put his picture up high and you celebrate his life.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. As I saw that post in the last couple of days, it reminded me of a quick story I'll tell about Jack, my son who we lost now over 10 years ago. And I remember there was a moment on our journey through pediatric cancer where he had just gone through a second round of 30 days of straight radiation, first round of chemo for the fifth time, a bald head, scar on the back of his neck from the brain surgery. And on the way home from this exhausting 2-week hospital stay, we stopped by the church so we could pray. And here's this little bald boy limping in because his physical stature was taken away a bit. And he's praying so intently in front of the altar. And we get up and pray. We were praying. He was praying. We get up and we walk out to go home and see our other kids after 2 weeks away in the hospital. And my wife said, Jack, do you ever pray for yourself? And he looked at her and said, why would I pray for myself? There's nothing wrong with me. Here's scarred, bald, radiation, chemo all through his body, limping in. He was playing baseball, just a couple years earlier. And he decided that it wasn't about him, that he was going to go into that church. Other people were going to see him praying intently. And why would he ever think to pray for himself? There wasn't anything wrong with him. His scars, he was happy to show. And I just remember such a proud dad moment in that. But I also relate that to what you say, about when you became aware of the fact that this could be something bigger for your life and realizing that. So I just wanted to share that as well.
From the little you shared about Jack, I can't wait to hear more. And I think I'm not alone in that. So I know you have a slow call on your heart to help tell that story in a mighty way. And
thanks for your help.
we're gonna be better because of it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, while we're on heroes in my Jack, let's talk about some of those pictures behind you to wrap up today. I know that it wasn't about you or you surviving a story. It was about Lavelle and Roy and these heroes that entered your life. And I know some of those pictures represent some of those heroes. But I believe one of them might be Martin Luther King. And I think, I love when I heard you talk about that, because I think so many times many of our listeners have families where kids may be choosing a different path, not going into the family business like they once thought, or acting a little bit different at this moment, going a different direction. And I thought we'd finish with that story to motivate people that it's going to be okay.
Right. And I'm going to let you put the explanation point on it, but I'm going to start it with this. You and I are having this conversation right now in my little office in St. Louis, Missouri, and behind me this is the wall of why. It's why I do what I do. It's my family. It's why I'm up early and it's why I'm out late. Like I serve for them. So behind me is my wife Beth and our family, Jack, Patrick, Henry, and Grace, and my parents, Susan and Denny, and their parents, my siblings, their family. So everybody behind me, those are my guys, man. They're why I work like I do. In front of us, that's our podcast wall. So that's where I have folks from astronauts and presidents and overcomers and mountain climbers and authors and just people I look up to. So those are the folks that we've had the honor of interviewing on our podcast. And then over on this wall, this is where I have folks from throughout history whose lives have changed the arc of society afterwards.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, they just have.
Unbelievable.
And what's important to recognize is every one of them is more broken than the next. I think we oftentimes view world changers as somehow being different. And I think they're only different insofar as they had the audacity to say yes and keep living that for the rest of their life. And so up here, I have pictures of like Abraham Lincoln, a grotesque failure in life. Mother Teresa made every mistake along the way. And just a little Albanian nun who made a left-hand turn into India. And when she died, they were serving 30 million orphans under her order, like because of her yes. Oscar Romero from El Salvador, and just these people that are just humble folks who recognize maybe it's not someone else that needs to step forward. Maybe it's me who needs to live that yes. And one of them is Martin Luther King Jr. And so many of the pictures of King, it's him at the White House or him in Birmingham or him in front of the reflecting pot. We're hearing so much about it in the media today. Why I love this picture is it's a picture of him looking at his daughter. And he's got his big old right hand on her shoulder, and she's just looking up, not at a guy who will have a statue in D.C. one day, and not at a guy who wrote an awful lot about not only racial relations, he wrote a ton about the gift of work. That's what I love reading King, in part because of the dignity of job.
Yeah.
Not job title, work. And so I just celebrate the fact that these folks over here have reminded us that a yes lived out faithfully over time can change not only your life, but the world.
Well, I think that's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. I was going to say, my next question was to be, what's one of your favorite quotes? I'm going to choose that one, saying yes, and how you can change the world in these small ways, right, that we've talked about today, which is just so incredible. And, I finished with one question. What is something that you're currently in awe of?
So I'm spending more and more time in nature as I become this old man, reflecting back in you. And so I'm in my late 40s now, and more aware of the intimacy we all have to life and how close we all are moment by moment to death. I think we just take it for granted. I don't. When I look in the mirror, and for the viewers, my body's burned third degree from neck to toe. So I don't look back at a muscular 48-year-old frame like never look better, buddy. I look down at scars and brokenness and weaknesses and infections. So I'm in awe now of the beauty of my life, at the certainty of what comes next. It's not even hope. It's certainty. It's conviction. I don't believe any of us are here by chance. I don't believe, like some of our scientists, that there was a Big Bang 12.8 billion years ago, and from that no one knows how it started, but from that nothingness sprung everythingness. I don't believe that. I don't believe math and biology and life came by accident. I think there is a master physician behind it all, and I think I know him as Jesus. And that, for me, like, that is awesome. So I'm in awe of that. I'm in awe of my wife's beauty. I had lunch with her earlier today, and we've been married 20 plus years. And I told her at lunch, I'm like, dude, I think you're prettier now than you were when we were dating, when we were teenagers. Like, I'm in awe of her. I'm in awe of our kids. And I think I'll finally end with this. I'm very selfish. Like, my heart is just tethered to me. I want me. And the hardest thing for me lately is letting go of my kids. You had to let go of your Jack at one point. I don't know how you did that, because I had to let go of my kids as I go off to college. And I used to just resent that. And I know it sounds like so strange, because like, John, it's so natural. But as they return now from college, and then as they get ready to return back to it, and ultimately to fly forward in life, wherever they go, I'm in awe that Beth and I have somehow raised these kids who love God. They love one another. They love the growth of knowledge, and they love life. And so I took a couple of the boys to a game last night, and we just sat there watching this game, but mostly just talking. And I'm in the middle, and the boys were flanking me. And the conversations we're having about politics and economics and injustice and the Cardinals with stupid trades and like everything else, the wisdom these kids have as they get ready to launch forward into life. I'm in awe of these kids now.
That's amazing. Well, certainly you are so inspiring. This has been fantastic. Your story reminds us that adversity does not have to define us, that gratitude can be learned and needs to be practiced and noticed in the small little things, but that purpose can emerge from pain. I love a part of the book where it said, victim into victor. That's you. And you help so many other peoples do that. In this world that moves so fast, that wonder is still available to all of us. And so to all of our listeners, I highly encourage you to pick up John's books, On Fire and In Awe. If you'd like a copy, we have plenty of them. We'll send you one. Just message us in the show descriptions and gather with your family. Let them flank you on both sides, as John just said, and watch the movie Soul on Fire. It will change you. It certainly has changed me. So, John, thank you so much for all that you do, for your Monday moments that get my week started right, for being a great friend, for pushing me with our story. And just hope that all of our listeners are inspired today. And we're so grateful for the time.
Looking forward to the next time, Brady. Thanks for being my friend.
Thank you all. And we'll see you next time on the Wealth and Purpose Podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Wealth and Purpose Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like this video, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. If you're inspired to connect your wealth and purpose further, or want to learn more about our firm, please visit our website at tfowealth.com and start a conversation with our team today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.